The diner was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that made you uneasy, like something bad was about to happen. At a corner booth sat a young woman, alone, sipping her coffee, her eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. She wasn't just any woman. She was the daughter of a blind war veteran, a woman who had never let her father's disabilities hold her back. But today, her life was about to change in ways she couldn't have imagined. Outside, the roar of engines shattered the silence. A gang of bikers, leather jackets gleaming in the afternoon sun, pulled into the parking lot. They were known for their intimidation, their reputation for causing trouble wherever they went. And today, it seemed, they had their sights set on her. The leader, a massive figure with tattoos that told stories of violence and power, strutted into the diner. He locked eyes with her, a smirk creeping across his face as he took in her unassuming presence. The other bikers followed, their heavy boots thudding across the floor. She didn't flinch. What they didn't know, what they couldn't see, was the strength buried deep inside her. A strength inherited from her father, who had fought wars, both on the battlefield and in life. But there was one thing the bikers couldn't have anticipated. She wasn't alone. Not really. One phone call. That's all it would take to turn the situation upside down. And when she made that call, everything was about to change. The question was, would they be ready for what was coming? Before we jump into today's story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If you love powerful stories of justice, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, so you never miss what's coming next. Now, let's get started. She sat there as if invisible to the world around her. A young woman, barely in her 20s, dressed simply yet with an air of quiet confidence that many overlooked. She wasn't staring blankly at the menu like most people. Instead, her hand lingered gently on the edge of the table, her fingers brushing the surface as if reading the subtle contours beneath her fingertips. To anyone passing by, she appeared just like any other diner patron, but they couldn't see what was hidden beneath the surface. Her name was Lily, and she had learned to live in a world of shadows. The kind of shadows where light didn't just fade, it disappeared. The kind that her father, a war veteran, had known all too well, having lost his sight years ago in the line of duty. But Lily, unlike many, never saw her father's blindness as a weakness. If anything, it had shaped her into someone capable of remarkable resilience. Growing up with a father who couldn't see her face or her struggles had forced her to become the kind of person who could fight battles no one else could even imagine. Though young, she had always been a force of nature, keeping her father's world together with fierce determination. Yet, today, something about her seemed different. Maybe it was the way her fingers tightened on the table, or the way she didn't flinch when the bikers entered. As if she knew, deep down, that this time would be different. Something was about to change, and Lily wasn't going to sit back and let it unfold without a fight. Because in this moment, she wasn't just the daughter of a blind man. She was a woman on the verge of proving just how much power lay hidden in her own hands, and the world was about to find out. The bikers had no idea who they were messing with. The sound of boots echoed in the diner as the bikers swaggered toward her booth. Their presence was a storm, dark and foreboding, and the moment they stepped inside, the air seemed to shift. The leader, a hulking figure with a thick beard and a jagged scar running down his cheek, towered over Lily. His gaze was filled with a dangerous mixture of arrogance and amusement, as if her mere existence were an insult to him. "You lost, sweetheart?" he sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. The others behind him laughed, their eyes scanning her like vultures. Lily didn't flinch. She sat there, calm and steady, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her nervous. But inside, a storm was brewing. She could feel the tension tightening in the air, thickening like smoke, choking the breath out of the once peaceful diner. "I'm fine, thank you," she said, her voice even, though her heart pounded in her chest. She wasn't blind like her father, but the discomfort was palpable. It was a battle of pride and intimidation, and she knew the rules. Never let them see you break. The bikers didn't like that. They hated being ignored, especially by someone they thought was easy prey. The leader took a step closer, his boots grinding against the floor, a sick grin curling his lips. "You think you're too good for us? Just because you're sitting here pretending to be all innocent doesn't mean we're not watching. You're just another girl waiting for trouble." The words stung, but they weren't the worst part. No, the worst part was the way the others circled, like wolves sensing weakness. They were drawing nearer, getting closer with each passing second, and Lily could feel their eyes burning through her. This wasn't just about bullying anymore. This was about control. They wanted to break her spirit, to make her feel small, to remind her that in their world, power meant everything. And in that moment, Lily realized something that made her stomach churn. This was no longer just about her. This was about her father, the man who had taught her everything she knew about resilience, about standing tall even when the world seemed to be crushing you. She had always fought for him, but now she realized the fight was far bigger than either of them. As the leader's hand reached out, ready to push her buttons further, Lily's fingers curled into a fist. She was done being underestimated, done being the easy target. The call was coming. She just had to make it. Lily's hand trembled, not from fear, but from the force of the emotions coursing through her. She'd spent her entire life walking in the shadows of others' expectations. But today, the shadows were about to shift. The bikers didn't know it yet, but they were playing with fire. They thought they could push her, humiliate her, make her bend, but they had no idea who they were really dealing with. The leader's grin widened, convinced he had her right where he wanted. "What's wrong, sweetheart? You gonna cry now?" His voice was thick with contempt, but as his hand reached out to grab her arm, something in Lily snapped. A calm fury ignited in her chest, a fierce power she had inherited from the one person who had always believed in her, the man who couldn't see, but who had taught her to see with a strength that cut deeper than any sight could. With a swift motion, Lily pulled back, her hand sliding into her purse. For a brief second, the gang froze, as if sensing a change in the air. What they didn't realize was that in that moment, Lily wasn't just a girl sitting in a diner. She was the daughter of a war hero, raised on lessons of survival and courage. She had lived her life quietly, patiently, watching and learning, never showing the full extent of what she was capable of. And now it was time to show them. Her fingers brushed the cool surface of her phone, and without hesitation, she pressed a single number. It wasn't just any number. It was the number that would change everything. A number she had never called before, because until now, she had never needed to. But today was different. The leader chuckled, still believing she was just another frightened victim. "What's that? You gonna make a call? Tell your daddy you're scared?" His voice was dripping with mockery. But as Lily raised her phone to her ear, the tone of her demeanor shifted. Slower, quieter, but with a chilling undercurrent of power. Her voice, once calm, now carried a weight that sent a subtle ripple through the room. "I'm not calling my father, but you'll regret underestimating me." The moment she spoke those words, the air seemed to thicken, and the bikers, who had been laughing and jeering, suddenly felt the ground shift beneath them. They were no longer in control. What Lily had just done, what they didn't yet know, was that she wasn't some helpless girl, dependent on others. She was capable of far more than they could ever imagine, and that single call would soon turn everything upside down. The seconds felt like hours as Lily's phone call continued, its tone echoing through the diner like a ticking bomb waiting to go off. The bikers' laughter faded into an uneasy silence. They were still unsure of what exactly was happening, but they knew something was off. Lily's calm demeanor was unnerving, too calm for someone they thought they could break so easily. The leader, the one who had been pushing hardest, narrowed his eyes. Something about her was bothering him. He could feel it, deep down, a tension rising in the pit of his stomach. He took a step back, trying to regain his usual bravado, But Lily didn't look away. Her eyes, hidden behind those sunglasses, still carried the weight of something far greater than they could fathom. Then, as if on cue, the sound of a distant engine roared to life outside, louder than the hum of the diner. The leader's gaze snapped to the window, but before he could register what it meant, he turned back to find Lily's phone pressed to her ear, her expression unwavering. "Who are you calling?" he growled, his voice now laced with suspicion. Lily didn't answer right away. Her eyes flicked briefly to the door as the engine sound grew closer. She was waiting for the moment to strike, when everything would come together. The phone call wasn't just a call, it was a signal, a message, one that would bring the change they hadn't anticipated. The bikers, sensing something was about to happen, grew restless. Some exchanged uneasy glances, others fidgeted with their jackets, and the air in the diner thickened further. But the leader, he was staring directly at Lily, trying to figure out what she was up to. And that was his mistake. He was too focused on her to see what was happening outside, where the sound of approaching motorcycles grew louder, closer. The moment that had been brewing was here. And it was no longer just a phone call. It was a signal that would trigger a storm. The doors of the diner suddenly swung open and the wind rushed in, carrying with it the unmistakable roar of engines, louder and more commanding than any of the bikers had ever heard. The leader froze, his eyes widening for just a moment. And in that brief, telling second, Lily's phone call reached its destination. The response she'd been waiting for was clear. The biker gang had just found themselves in a fight they never saw coming. And Lily, she was about to show them just how dangerous an underestimated woman could be. The diner door slammed open with a force that echoed through the empty space. The roar of engines drowned out everything else, a sound so powerful it seemed to shake the very foundation of the building. The bikers, still unsure of what was happening, turned toward the entrance, just in time to see the first few motorcycles pulling into the parking lot. It wasn't just a handful of riders, it was a full squadron. They didn't look like the type of people you'd want to mess with. Leather jackets, helmets, the unmistakable sense of authority. But it wasn't just their looks that caught the bikers off guard. It was the fact that they were organized. They were professionals. The leader of the gang stepped forward, narrowing his eyes as the sound of the motorcycles reached its peak. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, a flicker of doubt creeping into his voice. The others behind him were already stepping back, uneasy with what they saw. This wasn't just some random group of riders, this was a force, and it was coming for them. Lily stood up, her phone still in her hand. She looked the leader straight in the eyes, her voice calm but unmistakably firm. "You don't know who I am, do you? Or who's standing behind me?" The bikers were too caught up in the chaos unfolding outside to respond. They watched, frozen, as the motorcycles screeched to a halt, forming a tight, imposing circle in the diner's parking lot. The riders dismounted, their faces hidden beneath dark visors. But it wasn't the riders themselves that had the bikers trembling. It was the insignia on their jackets, the black and gold symbol that glinted in the sun. It was the symbol of a private security force, an elite group with a reputation for taking down threats in ways no one ever saw coming. Lily's phone call had reached the very people who had been keeping an eye on the bikers. They were professionals, ex-military, and highly trained. And they were here because Lily's father, her blind, war-hardened father, had once saved their lives in a battle none of them would ever forget. They owed him a debt they had sworn to pay. And now it was time to collect. The leader of the gang staggered back, his bravado slipping for the first time. You called them," he spat, his voice full of disbelief. Lily didn't flinch. Her eyes, still hidden behind the sunglasses, spoke volumes. "You don't mess with my family," she said, her voice laced with the kind of quiet fury that sent a chill through the room. "Not without consequences." The bikers had underestimated her, and it had cost them everything. The big reveal wasn't just that she was protected. It was that Lily herself wasn't a helpless victim. She wasn't just the daughter of a blind veteran. She was a force in her own right, standing tall and unyielding, and those who thought they could prey on her? They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The biker gang stood frozen, their once intimidating presence now reduced to mere shadows of uncertainty. Lily, standing tall, felt the weight of her decision lift from her shoulders as the group of riders advanced, their steps firm and purposeful. There was no turning back now. The bikers, who moments ago thought they had the upper hand, found themselves surrounded by professionals with skills far beyond their own, and their bravado turned to fear. The leader, now sweating and stumbling over his words, tried to salvage some shred of dignity. We didn't know. But there was no excuse for what they had done, no way to undo the threat they had posed. Lily stepped forward, her voice calm yet resolute. It doesn't matter what you knew. You targeted the wrong person, and now you'll have to face the consequences. Without raising her voice, she turned to the head of the security team, a silent command in her gaze. The bikers were quickly escorted out of the diner, their arrogance stripped away by the quiet strength of the force they had so wrongly underestimated. As the last of them disappeared into the distance, Lily took a deep breath and let it out slowly. The diners who had been watching from the sidelines, the ones who had seen the whole thing unfold, finally let out a collective sigh of relief. The tension that had gripped the room for so long melted away. The quiet return of peace was almost surreal, and yet, in that moment, it felt right. As the last of the riders' engines faded into the distance, Lily sat back down at her table, her hands steady now, her resolve unshaken. She wasn't just a daughter. She wasn't just someone people could look down on. She was more than that. She was a force of her own making, someone who had learned from the past, someone who had the strength to stand up for herself and for those she loved. Her phone buzzed in her hand. It was a message from her father. "Proud of you, Lily. You're stronger than you know." She smiled softly, her heart swelling with pride. The battle had been won, not by force or violence, but by the courage to stand tall, to trust in her own power, and to never back down from doing what was right. And the moral of it all? It wasn't about physical strength or having the upper hand. It was about recognizing your own worth, even when others fail to see it. It's about standing your ground, even when the world tries to knock you down. Because sometimes the greatest power you can possess is the belief that you are capable of far more than anyone ever imagined. Lily had proven that today, and no one would ever underestimate her again. Thank you for watching. Maya's story reminds us that standing up for what's right can create lasting change. Whether it's overcoming adversity or challenging injustice, your voice matters. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment with your thoughts on the story. Let's keep this conversation going. And remember, sharing these stories helps spread the message of justice and fairness, one act of courage at a time. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today.